Basketball Manitoba podcast, we have Martha Bradbury. She's been official in Manitoba for over 25 years at all levels of the game. She is a graduate of Nelson High School in Burlington, Ontario, where she was named Athlete of the Year. She played basketball, volleyball, and competed in track and field, where she held an Ontario record for high jump for around 10 years. She then went on to graduate at the University of Manitoba. After graduation, she was a U Sport official for 22 years. She officiated the U Sport Nationals 4 times. She officiated Canada Basketball Nationals 5 times. She was a referee coach at Nationals for 8 times. She is currently a Provincial Supervisor and board member for the Manitoba Association of Basketball Officials. She's one of MABO's lead clinicians and evaluators, and she represented the Canadian Basketball Officials Commission on the Junior NBA Canadian Leadership Council. And lastly, if all this officiating wasn't enough, she also officiated football in Manitoba for many years. Martha, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Darcy. I really appreciate you inviting me to come on.
Absolutely. Well, to be fair, we'll say, you should thank Adam. Adam's, we got to give him his due. He gets the talent. I just do the interview. So I'm excited to jump in because I've only officiated. I've only interviewed people who I would consider, peer officials. You didn't play college for all these years and then transfer.
Yeah.
I think Reed might be the only one.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say the same thing I said to you that I said to him. You're a lifer, right? You're an official, and you have a background in basketball and track and field. You were an athlete, but your adult life, you're known as an official. And you came from obviously Burlington, Ontario. You didn't play high school basketball here, but I know that you have an athletic background. Obviously, you don't just win Athlete of the Year without being a phenomenal athlete. So I want to just jump right in here because there's lots to discuss. So when you obviously were in Burlington, Ontario, you're not from Manitoba. You played multiple sports. You're obviously a really good athlete. You went to a decent sized school. So it wasn't like you're winning Athlete of the Year at a school with like 200 kids. Talk to me about what were some of your earliest memories of not just basketball, but just like athletics and how important those were to you as you were growing up.
Yeah. It's a great question because I remember vividly really getting involved in athletics in grade 7. My plan actually, because it was fairly typical then for girls especially to be cheerleaders, was to be a cheerleader because that's what you saw, right? As a female, that's often what you saw. I mean, for sure, they're athletes. It was a little bit different then. You see some now and I'm like amazed at what they do, but then you had your pom-poms, you kind of danced on the sideline. And I remember talking to a teacher about that kind of early in grade 7 and saying, I'm going to join the cheerleading squad. And he said, well, why don't you join the basketball team? And it never really occurred to me because my parents weren't athletes. Well, there's a big backstory to kind of my family because I'm one of 6 adopted kids. So, from my birth mom, she was an athlete. So that's where I get my athletic kind of prowess from, but my parents weren't. And so that's probably why it wasn't on my radar then. I sort of thought about it and thought, I guess it can't really hurt. I knew I wanted to do something and get involved at school. And so I tried out. I made the team. I was one of 2 grade 7s on the grade 8 team, which was great because I'd never played basketball before. And I played a lot, which was great. So that's kind of my earliest memory of really getting into sports. And then that got me into, all the school sports. So basketball and volleyball and track and field, and then gymnastics and softball in the summer. And it just sort of spiraled for me from there. And it became, I was a really good student, but it became for me the reason that I went to school. I wanted practices and I wanted the camaraderie of my team and I wanted my coaches and the approval of my coaches and I wanted to play. It really for me became all consuming.
Mm.
was a little bit of a frustrating sticking point for my mother because she's artsy and she wanted me to play the piano. And I was good at the piano, but I didn't want to practice. I didn't want to go to my lessons because it conflicted with sports for me. And
Mm.
sports was where it was at. So, as much as my mom didn't get that and didn't understand my passion for me, there was just no other thing to do except sports.
Yeah.
So, that was my foundation. And then from there, I played, grade seven, grade eight, and all the way through high school. I mean, until I blew out my knee in grade 12 and tore my
Oh,
ACL. But,
oh, dang.
I lost my senior year, which wasn't great, but, um, I loved it. It was,
Yeah.
it was my reason for being sports. I was all about sports.
Okay. So two questions. First of all, the grade seven teacher. So you're telling me that the first sport you played was basketball?
That is the first sport I played.
Look at
Yeah.
that. We didn't talk about that offline.
Yeah.
This is all new to me. So
Yeah.
that's super cool. So you got introduced to sport essentially through basketball, and then that
I
kind of
did.
led you on to just keep pursuing all these sports. Okay.
Sure did.
So the question is, and you don't have to say basketball. What was your favorite sport? Like you played so many. Like what did you really just love to do?
Oh, without a doubt, it was basketball.
Basketball. It was okay.
No, no, no ifs, ands, or buts. I mean, I loved the team part of it.
Mhm.
Um, I liked track and field. I was really good at it, but it was so much more individual.
Yeah.
And I like that kind of team bonding. And frankly, you even get that as an official,
Mm.
right? I mean, it sounds kind of ironic and strange because we're out there, but we always say like we're the third team on the floor, right? We're always out in a pair, we're out in
Yeah.
threes. And then outside of being on the court, we're all together and talking and
Hmm.
chatting. So we do have that team bond still. And I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the team part of it was really important to you. So digging in more on the basketball, since this is the Basketball Manitoba podcast, you
Yeah.
played grade seven. You obviously were athlete of the year. You talked about blowing out your knee.
Yeah.
What was it? What was your high school career like playing basketball? What position did you play? Like, just give us a little snippet of what was going on back then.
Yeah. I played, all the way through until, as I said, I blew out my knee. So in grade nine, we always had like our high schools went from grade nine to grade 13, always. And so you had an option to be on the grade nine team or
Mhm.
the JV team or the varsity team, probably a little like it is now here. But I played on the JV team like right away when I got there. I was a starter. I'm only 5'8", which is somewhat tall, but I was one of the taller ones on the team, so I usually played post.
Mhm.
Um, I there was a little bit of that kind of there was a little bit of animosity here and there because I was so young and I always started. And even when I was one of the younger on the team, then the older players didn't get as much playing time. And so there was a little bit of that. At the end of the day, like I didn't really care about that because I just wanted to play. Like I was just there
Mm.
to play and be a part of the team and enjoy the experience. And um, thinking back, I know that there were some people that didn't love that I
Yeah.
got as much playing time as I got. Um, but I did, and I
Yeah.
earned it. I didn't just do it and I wasn't good at it. I was good at it. Um I wasn't a dirty player, but I learned really early what I could get away with and what I
Mhm.
couldn't get away with. And I took advantage of that. And some refs you could kind of fool and some refs you couldn't, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the reality is, though, when I think back to my high school career, I didn't even notice the officials. Like,
Mm.
I didn't, I know that they were there and part of the game,
Yeah.
but like, the game just happened and they were just there and
Yeah.
I was just there to play. I didn't really care. Not that I didn't care about them, but I didn't care.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I
And so
totally
it
understand.
wasn't like then I was like, oh, when I grow up, I want to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about it. So it's kind of strange. Again, for me, in my basketball experience, because my high school kind of was where I played mostly, um, it was always middle-aged white men, right? And maybe
Mm-hmm.
that is in part why I didn't really pay attention. And
Yeah.
often those were the coaches too, right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
middle-aged white men, because that's
Yeah.
we're talking about 1980, was it 1983 to 1987, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's just who sort of was the leadership of basketball.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that could be in part where I really didn't pay attention.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, we're gonna kind of get into your the officiating side of it and your role. Obviously, like being a female official. That's one thing because like you've officiated me, many people. You're officiating all sorts of levels, and you're seeing some of the stuff even at the higher levels of like women entering into like quote unquote like men's spaces with sports. Like this is
Mhm.
something that's as coaches or officials, this is something that's becoming more common. And I'm sure you have your own experiences with that,
I
and I,
do.
and I definitely want
Yeah.
us to go through there. So then why don't we just how the heck did you get to Winnipeg? I mean, let's just jump right to that. So like you played high school and all that stuff. You blew your
Yeah.
when did you blow your knee out in
In 19, I did it in spring of 1986, and I had it repaired in right before school started in 1986
was this an
in
ACL
Toronto.
or
Yeah, full
okay.
tear.
Were you
So
playing
full
basketball?
replacement. I was.
Of
Yeah.
course, of course. You're just gonna thank basketball for everything. Like, yeah, sure, I did all the other sports, broke a high jump record, but basketball
Yeah.
introduced me to the game. I love playing it and then blew my knee out. That sucks.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um,
Twice. I've done it twice because
the
I did
same
it
knee?
again playing the same knee. Yeah.
Was this
Yeah.
like senior women's or something?
Yeah. Senior women's. I did it
Oh.
exactly the same way I did it the first time. I've had it repaired again, but I won't repair it again if I can.
Okay, so then how'd you get to Winnipeg? What's the story? Like how did you end up coming out here?
So I and my husband will hate that I say this, but I've been with my husband since I was 15. So we
You could say your husband's name, I think that
yeah,
people want to make sure you
okay.
say who he is,
Okay.
just in case people
My
don't
husband
know.
so my husband's Al Bradbury. He longtime CFL official,
Yes, yes.
now manager of officials for the CFL, manager of the
Oh,
replay booth. So
yeah.
officiating kind of
Yes.
runs in our family. So and I'm sure it will come up because you'll ask me how
Yes.
I got involved in officiating and that'll come back. Um, so my husband went to school to be a police officer and he applied right around the time I was finishing high school. Actually, right around when I had my knee replacement or my ACL replacement, because I remember being in the hospital in Toronto and he was there studying, sitting beside me in the hospital. So
Nice. That's cool.
um, he got on the police service. He was trying in Ontario, but affirmative action was already in place. So ironically, if you were a white male, they weren't really even looking at you.
Hmm.
He had family in Manitoba, even though we both grew up in Southern Ontario, and thought, well, sure, I'll give it a try because that's what he wanted to do. And he got on the Winnipeg Police Service and sort of said, well, I'm going. Are you coming? And that was sort of it. And I think we thought, okay, we'll come for a couple of years.
Yeah, of course.
You'll get your
Yeah.
feet wet, and then we'll go.
Yeah.
And then we came out, and honestly, like we fell in love with Winnipeg. I
Mm,
know it gets a bad rap, and I know people, and I mean, look outside right now, and the winter is cold. It's cold,
yes.
but it's a great city. I say it's a big city with a small town feel.
Hmm.
And we had our kids, and now we have grandkids, and it's home.
Yeah.
And so we stayed, and he was on the police service for 32 years until he retired. And it's awesome. Like we love it. And frankly, it was nice to grow up in Burlington. It was a lovely
Mhm.
city, but Southern Ontario, way too busy for me. I can't take the
Yeah.
traffic and
Yeah. Yeah.
all of the
For
other
sure.
things that come along with it. So I'm happy we made this move. It was
Yeah.
great for us.
I love it. I love that. I was laughing when you said, we thought we were going to go back. The amount of people that end up like, whether it's people who play college here and they're just like, I guess I live here now.
I know, but it's
It's
such a great city.
it
Like
it
it,
really is. It really is.
and I'm glad more people don't know what a great city it is because I don't want a whole bunch of people moving here and turning it into a Toronto,
Yes, yes, yeah.
So
Yeah, I think the thing I'll say about like Winnipeg and Manitoba and stuff like that is like you said it perfectly. Like it's not super small, like, but it's this feel is very small
yeah.
based upon like the connections that you can make. And I think there's like a really nice network of supportive people there. And I've always said this when it comes to like raising a family, you want to like relax and like it's a great place for that. Like it really is, like
So
without
good.
question. So totally there with you on that. Got to ask a question though. You athlete of the year, you come out to Winnipeg. I know you went to the University of Manitoba. What
Yeah.
why didn't you pursue any sports once you were out here?
Yeah.
Or did
So
you, I should say.
yeah. So because Al got hired so late in my grade 13 year, back then, like all of your applications had to be in, and that was snail mail days, right? So
Mhm.
I had applied to three universities and been accepted in Ontario, but I hadn't applied to any in Manitoba because when the applications were due, I didn't know that we would be out here. So I didn't apply, which meant I had to take a year off. Um, so after I took a year off, during that year, I applied to U of M and got in. And I went and talked to Colleen again, right? This is the advent of way before computers and
Yeah, yeah.
email um and so she agreed, like I tried out for her. She agreed that I could redshirt and I did it. Actually, I mean, I've got to be honest, it wasn't for very long. Mostly because we were out here, we had an apartment.
Mhm.
I couldn't do full-time university, work two part-time jobs, and be a
Yeah, yeah,
full-time
yeah.
athlete at university. I wish I could have because I know I wanted to.
Hmm.
Um, it just it just wasn't in the cards
Yeah,
then for us. So something had to give, and it had to be that was the one thing that sadly had to give so
yeah,
that we could live and I could get my degree and we could do all of that. So
for sure. No, that totally makes sense.
yeah,
And what did you do any recreational sports where you were, like, hey, I'm not playing, but like, did you
yeah,
play any leagues or anything like that?
yeah. I didn't do any intramurals.
Nothing.
I did. I mean, I would play, pick up softball if Al's team got us, but honestly, like full-time university and two part-time jobs and 19 years old and just having moved 2,500 kilometers
Yeah,
away from my support network, it, it was just so overwhelming just trying to and and well, fiance then that worked shift work, and so I was really on my own a lot of the time.
mm,
It just I think it just at that time was more than I could even fathom. And
yeah.
so, I mean, in hindsight, I probably should have. It would have been a great way to meet more people. Because even at school, I was so busy. Like I literally went to school long enough to go to school, and then I
And
left
then,
immediately and went to work, and then I went
yeah,
to my other job. And so even there, like I don't have any friends from university.
interesting.
And you often bring your friends from high school. Well, I didn't have that, right?
Yeah,
Because and even trying to keep your connection to your high school
yeah,
friends when it's snail mail and like, yeah, letter writing for a little while, but eventually even that kind of falls
yeah,
off and you don't do that.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
just so much easier now to keep in touch.
Yes.
So yeah, I just didn't make those connections then. And if I had, I'm sure I would have gotten involved in
Hmm.
other things, but I did
Just
not.
like you said, it wasn't in the cards. I mean, again, like moving your working jobs and moving to another city as a young person is like a lot, right? But I'm just gonna ask the question.
Yeah.
You said it's like, so you didn't really play any sports, but you
Yeah.
mentioned, you said, look, I love the camaraderie that comes from sport. You mentioned
Yeah.
basketball, and you slid in there. Us officials, we have camaraderie, and there's a team aspect to it. There's that togetherness where we're the third team on the floor. So
Yeah.
how did you actually get into the the art of officiating basketball? Because it is really an art,
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
honest
So
with you.
this is where I said Al would come back into the picture,
Okay.
because what happened was Al was riding a bus to work one day and someone went and talked to him, police officer, and said, "Hey, you look like you played football." And he did. Have you ever thought about officiating? And just like me, he's like, no. But this guy said, "Why don't you try officiating?" And so that Saturday, he was out there in his like runners and jeans, reffing a football game. And so he did it that first year and like just came home to me one day and said, like, "I love this. And I think you would love this." And
No
I,
way.
football then, like I'd never played football, but I played basketball. So he said, like, you should try it. And again, so this was, let's see here. So my son was born in 1995. So this was 1996. Again, just the beginning of home computers,
Hmm.
right? So no email, no real way to figure out. You're looking through the phone book. Who am I phoning?
Yeah.
How do I get? I reached out to Basketball Manitoba. I was given Dave Morphy's name, but I was
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
are they all connected? Do I have to go to Basketball Manitoba and then do I approach this Dave Morphy guy and then do I approach this Wes Crimble guy?
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, the long and short of it is I figured out that yes, they're all connected. It's the same thing. And so I had reached out to Dave and said, I played basketball and I think I'd like to try officiating. And so he said, well, we have a clinic. And so I found my way to the clinic. It was at St. James Collegiate. Um, Crazy sitting there, sort of trying to like learn the rules because as a player,
Yeah.
I
You don't.
never looked, I didn't even know a rule book existed. I
Yeah.
guarantee it.
Yeah.
Um, and then add to that trying to learn the mechanics, like where
Mm.
I'm supposed to stand, what am I supposed to look at, and just get a feel for that. I just remember standing there that day thinking, and that they were doing 3-person. Like my first
Oh,
clinic,
wow.
they did 3-person. I was like, what is C and what else, what's lead? I don't know what these are. I had no idea what, like I knew I wanted to do it,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what I was doing. And of course, I went in there and there was like one other woman started when I did, and I think there was one other woman at the clinic. So
Really?
you're in a room of let's call it 150 people, 3 women. I don't know soul because I'm not part of the
Yes.
basketball community, right? I didn't grow up here. I don't know any of these people. I'm just sort of sitting by myself trying to figure my way through this. And that was sort of my foundation of getting into basketball because after that clinic, Dave Morphy, who I mentioned earlier, was my assigner because I live in the South End. And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to give you a game with one of my experienced officials. You're going to do a half with him. And then Mary Jo, she was the other new female, is going to do a half with him." And we were at Fort Richmond Collegiate. I remember this so vividly.
Oh,
I
oh,
have
wait. Hold on. Your first game is a high school game at FRC.
first game, first game at FRC. I'm like, okay, says JV. It was a tournament.
Yeah.
I had zero clue. I did. I knew. I didn't know what I was doing. I
Yeah.
remember calling a pushing foul when a girl just tripped over another girl. I remember the coach being mad. I remember thinking, I don't know what I'm like. I have no idea what I'm doing here. Blair Unger was the senior partner that partnered with us, who happened ironically to live on my street.
No way.
Crazy,
That's a
just
Winnipeg
down
thing.
the street from me. But so great and so supportive and
Hmm.
so patient
Hmm.
because that having I mean I don't well I guess I've kind of been in that position, but he was just so patient and he's taking grief from
Of
people for
course.
the things
Yeah.
that I'm doing, and he's still so patient and so understanding because I mean think about it. Then, so we were talking 1996, that was the year that the WNBA started.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I met Reed Kenyon at that clinic, and he was named as the assigner. And he's like,
Yeah.
well, you can do some of these WNBA games. And I didn't know what that was. But again, so I did, on top of getting right into high school, because that's back then, that's what you did.
Hmm.
I did do a lot of WNBA games. So I had several years where probably the bulk of my games were with the WNBA.
Hmm.
But I, throw in a few, well, I shouldn't say a few high school games because I actually, in my first season, did do the single A provincials. So I
No
must have
way.
done something right. But from that starting point of going to the clinic and doing my first game to then doing single A girls provincials, that was crazy for
That,
me.
so yeah, because I had a question here, like, what was your first game? You told me you're like, okay, Dave, so we're sending you to FRC. I was like, really?
I,
But as you mentioned, the WNBA wasn't established at that point, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
and as you also mentioned, is you went on to officiate quite a bit in the WNBA as well,
I
which
did.
is, obviously I used to be the executive director, and I just
Yeah,
interviewed Reed not too long ago, and we were talking about how important that league was, is getting officials. It's very much an introductory for players and
yeah.
officiators to
Mm.
officials to get comfortable with the game. But I'm so curious here. Do you remember what do you remember being the biggest difference from when you first started that first game to obviously doing the single A provincials with
Yeah.
regards to like your confidence? And what do you remember being the biggest difference? Was it just, hey, more repetitions? Did you just know more rules? What was the biggest indicator for, or like thing that made a difference for you in feeling comfortable on the court as an official?
Yeah. I think it's all of those things. It's repetition, just like for players and coaches, repetition is really important. I think what's more difficult for officials in developing their game is we don't have that, okay, practice because it's
Mm-hmm.
not the same. Yes, we can go in and practice, we can run the floor, we can look where
Yeah.
we're supposed to look, but when we don't have a game in front of us, you're
Mm-hmm.
missing such a large component where the players can practice and they
Mm-hmm.
can, go 5-on-5 and they're doing what they need to do. And the coach can practice their plays while their players go 5-on-5. Our only option to truly grow and get better is to officiate a game, which
Mm-hmm.
obviously is why I got put into that JV game
Mm-hmm.
because if you don't go out and do it,
Yeah.
you're not going to develop your game,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's not going to grow. For me, it was all about the partners that Dave Murphy put me with. He put
Mm.
me with strong partners that helped me grow my game, develop my game, that could support me while I
Yes.
was learning the game,
Hmm.
that could step in when that coach, probably rightfully so, was irritated with me because I truly didn't know what I was doing,
Yeah.
you know? But they could step in and support me
Mhm.
because the reality is, and you know this from being the executive director of the WNBA, without that support,
Mhm.
you quit,
Yeah.
right? If I didn't
100%.
have that support and I didn't have somebody that could talk to that coach for me, that could give me the pointers I needed to help me understand how to develop my game in a effective way, I wouldn't still be doing it.
Mhm.
Why would I do it?
Yeah.
If I'm just going to get yelled at, or if I have a partner that isn't going to support me or help me grow my game, why would I continue to do it?
Mhm.
And so for me, it was all about who Dave partnered me with, how Dave supported me through those sort of early months of me officiating that culminated in me getting a single A provincial assignment in my first year of ever officiating. And I don't know, I mean, I've got to be honest, like at the end of that first year, I still didn't feel that confident, even getting provincials, because I remember saying to Wes Crimble, who at the time was the provincial supervisor, I'll do it because really nervous. Only four officials were going. I said, I will do it, but I don't want the final. So don't
Mm.
even think about giving me the final because I just didn't feel confident. And then we got out there and he assigned me the final. And I was like, what is happening here? I said I'll do it, but I don't want the final.
Uh,
So, I mean, I feel like I was probably better than my level of confidence led me
yeah.
to believe I was, but it takes time to develop that. And I guess I really didn't want to disappoint the players and the coaches and the fans that worked so hard to get there when I felt like I didn't really know if I should be there. They didn't make me feel that way. Like, like it was in Treeherne. I remember walking into the gym and I heard someone loudly say, "Chick ref." Because I said to you, like there were three female MABO officials at the time.
No
Three.
way. Yeah.
And they'd never seen a female official.
Oh, that's
So
wild.
they were excited. They were supportive. I mean, this is a girls' tournament, so they are excited to see
Yeah.
a woman.
Yep.
Um, so it wasn't them. It had nothing to do with how they made me feel. The teams that were there, the coaches that were there, the fans that were there, the organizers, they were fantastic. It was
Mm.
all about me being in my own head.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. It's like there's always these two sides to that kind of stuff where I find some of the people, because they always say like confidence is so important, confidence is so important, but there's like this thin line where you become overconfident, and as a result of that, the quality of what you're doing slips because you think you're good. Where if you're just below that line and you're still learning, you're going to do the extra work and you're going to be like, oh, I don't know, like you're a little uncertain. You don't want to be like super low in the dirt, but it sounds like you were just in that stage where there's the line and you're learning how to get to that line so you can feel confident, but you didn't want to mess up, and it's because you cared, right? Like you
For
were like,
sure.
I got this. And a lot of times you see people take that approach. They don't care. And sounds like you really cared. You wanted to do a good job. And that's why you had that sentiment going into it.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
you talked, you said a few people in there, you had some great partners, and obviously Dave Morphy and stuff. Who were some of your early mentors and the people that has been guiding you? And again, obviously just not in your first year, but just kind of as you move
Yeah.
through this whole journey you've been on.
Yeah, I think like early in my career, Blair Unger definitely, Joe Danis,
Mhm.
he absolutely was
Joe,
a huge part. I know, kind of
yeah,
old school there, but like a huge part of
yep,
my
yep.
early officiating career. He was,
Mhm,
a younger guy that was really supportive and really had a good foundation in basketball.
mhm, mhm.
And then there were some older guys like Bob Brickey. He hasn't been around for a long time, but he was a really good, just a really calm partner.
Mm,
Um, Dave Morphy, without question, a
of course.
huge mentor. We refereed together a few times. Hadn't really, he wasn't really on the court much after I started officiating, but we had a few opportunities where we got to ref together. But always someone I could bounce ideas off of, and a shoulder to cry on if I needed that. Like he was a huge supporter. Wes Crimble, huge supporter. Um, uh, I think that as I moved into university, like Cam Moskal, very
Mhm.
big supporter, Reed Kenyon, Ozzie Philippin. I went in with Earl
Ozzy.
Roberts. Yeah, like
Yeah, yeah.
Earl and I went in at the same time. So
Hmm.
we kind of could bounce things off each other and support each other. Um, really, those were some really key people for me. And obviously a lot of the key people for me, well, most of them are officials because I didn't have that basketball foundation here,
Hmm.
from my playing years. So I don't really have, there's always people back in high school and coaches that
Yeah,
influenced you, or, the grade 7 teacher that got me into sports instead
yeah,
of, into being a cheerleader.
yeah,
Rod Pepler, another
yeah.
huge supporter, especially of females in officiating. I mean, frankly, at the beginning, he was by far my biggest champion
Mm.
because he really wanted to promote women in officiating. Um, a bit of a tough cookie sometimes, but
Yeah,
fantastic, just knowledge and foundation and support, and the kind of guy that just tells it like it is, you
mm.
know?
Hmm.
So yeah, those are sort of some of the big ones for me.
Yeah. I mean, you named a bunch of people that would be like, staples, legends, people who have just been developing the game for so long. And when I come on these
Yeah.
podcasts and I talk to anyone who's officials, all the people you named, they come up, right? So much so it's interesting, obviously as I, I've been in the South, right? Glenlaw and everything like that.
Yeah.
And then, you see these people later on, you're like, oh yeah, I used to see you, and like, I met like see people, and you realize as you mature how important officials are to the game and the development of the game. And I was just talking to Earl, and we were talking about the same topic. And a lot of times, I would say most of the time, there's a level of not disrespect, but almost like they don't matter. And I'm only gonna make them matter if like they mess up, right? Like that's like
Yeah.
the only time you get to like some attention. Um,
Yeah.
but then you come to realize later on, and obviously I have a unique position being an executive director and then also coaching and stuff like that, is like the officials have such a huge impact on the game. And if the officials aren't developed, the development of the game and the players slows down as well. And so that
100%.
development is so important because it's circular and you are a part of the game. You are a team.
Yeah.
And so I never heard that term before. And I love that you said that. We're the third team on the floor. I really like that. That
Yeah.
was really cool.
Yeah.
So then you mentioned this a few times. I just would love to hear. You said when you went into the 1A provincials, someone said a chick ref, right? You
Yeah.
talked about people being, only having two officials, and now obviously that's changed, right? Like it's not like that at all. Like there's female
Yeah.
officials everywhere. But can you talk to me maybe a little bit about, and again, this could be any time that you officiated,
Mhm.
but maybe the first time you remember that you felt like you were out of place. Meaning, did you officiated a game, but specifically for being a woman, or did you never really experience those moments? Because what it sounds like is someone realized, hey, there's a female official.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's surprising. And I'm sure
Yeah.
as much as they were happy to see that at a girls' provincials, I'm sure on the other side of it, there is maybe some stuff people are like, oh, female ref. Now
Yeah.
again, I know it's not really a question;
Yeah.
it's more of an open
Yeah.
comment. But I know you can take that many places
Yeah.
because you experienced it. So just maybe what's been your
Yeah.
experience, kind of moving through the thing,
Yeah.
being one of two, and then seeing people, more and more women, be part of the game, and kind of how did that affect you or your experience of officiating, being a woman?
Yeah. I never really felt out of place because I was a woman. Um, and I think that probably is in large part due to the fact that for the most part, your partner's just accepted you as an official, right?
Mhm.
Generally, I didn't ever feel like my partner or partners treated me differently because I was female. Um, I have always sort of one of my big kind of endeavors or desires with officiating is that women are just recognized as officials. Because the reality is, when I go out on the
100%.
court, right, if I have a male partner and there's me, they don't say, oh, there's a male official. They say there's an official, but then there's
Mhm.
me. Oh, there's a female official. And I would love to get to a point where we're all just officials. Of course, the problem is that forever, as I said before, typically it was middle-aged white men that officiated basketball. And when I played high school, there were no women officiating. Um, so I think that kind of struggle is real and it's still real because yes, there are many more female officials, but still in Manitoba, for example, out of our call it 250 officials, less than 20% are female.
Mhm.
When you consider that half the participants of basketball are female, it still is it's lopsided.
Mhm.
So um I I I think that where I've been lucky is because when I started, as I said, I went in with one other female official, but she lasted maybe 2 years. Um, and then Marla Langelots, who was there when I started, was only there for a couple more years as well. Um, where for me, because there were so few, I probably got opportunities
Mhm.
sooner
Yeah. Yeah.
than some of my male counterparts would have.
Mhm.
That's just the reality because people wanted to see female officials refing. They especially wanted to see female officials refereeing girls.
Mhm.
Um, I remember one kind of really somewhat defining moment for me was I was at the University of Winnipeg and I was roughing in the Westman Classic, the varsity girls, and I had just finished roughing, and someone high up in the administration at the University of Winnipeg approached me after the game and said, "I want you to officiate university basketball." And I said, I think I had maybe been refereeing for two years, maybe. And I said, "That's great. I want to referee university basketball. I'm not ready." And he said, "No, I don't care. We'll put you with two men. They'll protect you. I just want women refereeing the university game." And I said, "You might not care, but I care. I'm not going in there not capable of doing my job. I'm
Mm,
not here to rely on my male partners.
yeah.
I'm here to do my job. They're
Hmm.
here to do their job." So I understand where you're coming from, but that doesn't work for me.
Mm,
And so I really pushed back and I just said, "I want to be here when I'm ready to be here."
yeah.
And
Hmm.
so it was 2 more years before I got there, but I went, by then I'd gone to a camp, I'd been seen by national evaluators and clinicians, and I'd gotten good feedback, and I'd refereed some three-person because at that time I'd literally never refereed a three-person game.
Mm,
So, and it's as much as it's just basketball, from an official's perspective, it's very different
hmm.
because your areas of responsibility are very different. And I understand that for a lot of coaches and players, they think we just go out and call whatever we see. We actually have
Yes.
responsibilities and
Yes.
areas that we're responsible for.
Yes.
So, um, for that was a very defining moment for me
Mm,
because that spoke volumes,
mm,
telling me that here I am working hard to develop my game and grow as an official, and to your point earlier, do the best job so as to not to have a negative impact on the game. Like
hmm,
that's the last thing any official wants. The
hmm,
players practice hard and play hard, and the coaches work hard to develop themselves. And I don't want to go out there and be the reason that the game isn't good.
hmm.
That's not my intention. But I felt really deflated at the time, just thinking, like, does he really not care whether or not
Mm,
I do a good job? Like, I don't want to be the token female official out there.
hmm,
That's
hmm.
not what I want. That's not who I am. That's not what I want for myself. I'm glad I pushed back. I remember going to Dave Morphy at the time, who was the supervisor here for university, and just saying, like, this was the conversation, and I not comfortable with it. And he agreed, and I was glad that I had his support. And he said, "Look, we're going to
Mm,
work to develop your game and we're going to work to grow you, but you're not ready." And I knew I wasn't ready,
yeah.
but I, you know, I felt discouraged because he would
Mm,
never have said that to a male official. Never.
yeah. 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 I see what I see what and again, you're just thinking like, look, I want to be good at what I'm doing. And I think that speaks back to what you were saying the first time you had they said, "Hey, I'm going to send you out to do a single A." You're like, "I don't think I'm
Exactly.
ready yet, right?
Exactly.
I don't think I'm ready." Like, but at
Yeah.
some point you got to get pushed a little bit. But at this point, like it's the same mentality that's kind of there. You're like, I want to be ready to do this, right? And I want to do it. It's just I want to be ready to do it, and that's super important. And
Exactly.
it shows a level of self-awareness, which is like um I had the same conversation with Carl that were officials that just in
Yeah.
that state about how important it is to have that self-awareness as an official because things are happening. People are, like coaches are saying stuff, players are saying stuff. It's an intense game. And if there's no like a low level of self-awareness, you get lost in that,
Yeah. Well, yeah,
and
and I mean it was risky for me when you think about it because in the back of my head I'm thinking, okay, if I say no to this person right now,
yeah.
am I is this it? Is this my only shot? Am
Hmm.
I shooting myself in the foot? I will never get another opportunity to do
Hmm.
university because I want to do university. So it was risky for me, but I
Hmm.
knew for me, I had to say, I'm not ready.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. So then when were you ready? You said it was 2 years later or
It
a
was
year
two
later?
years later. Yeah, it was two
Okay.
years later. Yeah. So
So
that
what
would
was
have
the
been,
process? Like, do you just like say, hey, like we want you now, when you're ready, and
yeah.
then you moved up? Like, how did you actually make the jump?
Yeah. So I went to a camp. I signed myself up for a camp because that was really one of the requirements, and it is still a requirement that you go to a camp or two to get developed because those camps are built to develop officials. As much as
Mm,
players are playing and coaches are coaching, everybody there knows it's really about the officials and they're there to develop the officials. So I got the opportunity to go to a camp. I signed up for a camp. I went to a camp in Montreal in 1999.
mhm.
God, it was hot. It was crazy. No air conditioning in the gyms. And like, oh, it was, I mean, an awesome experience because I met some of, my closest friends now, lots of them women, which was fantastic for me. Karen Lazouk and Nancy Etier and Nadine Crowley and Donna Townsend, like Penny Wright, like most of them from like out east, out west, but like, I mean, Karen's refereed the Olympics now.
Oh
Nancy's
wow,
refereed the Olympics.
that's cool.
Donna refereed the Olympics. Nadine is a high level FIBA commissioner, like amazing, amazing people.
Mm,
Um, so it was a great experience, not just for the basketball part of it, but for kind of meeting other officials across the country. It was truly my first experience in meeting officials outside of Manitoba.
yeah, yeah. Just
So people that are still my friends, almost 25 years later, like just amazing for me. But they helped me, not them because they were campers too, but the clinicians helped me see that I was actually, they were surprised to hear I'd never refereed three-person before. So
mm,
they felt like I felt, oh, maybe I am better than I am giving myself credit for. So after I went to that camp, I came home, I had a conversation with Dave. Earl was at the camp too, Earl Roberts, I
okay,
think.
nice, nice,
Um, had a conversation with Dave, and he said, okay, next season we'll put you into a couple games, we'll see how it goes.
nice.
Um, it was and it was great, like nerve-wracking. Like it's scary. You're in front of coaches that get paid to coach for the first
Hmm.
time in your career and in front of these high-level athletes that, work hard and commit to the game and grow their game and are competitive. And again, the last thing you want to do is be a negative impact on the game. But
Yeah,
I didn't have a lot of experience at this other than the camp, like this level of basketball
yeah.
and in three-person. So it was terrifying. And I went out with my first partners and we had a double whistle and, you know, I mean, in three-person, you tend to have a little bit more. You
Yeah.
don't like them, but you tend to have a few more. We had a double whistle. My partner was like, oh, you blow your whistle in my area, I blow my whistle in your area. And I was like, what? Yeah, so I was like,
No way.
I'm trying to learn. It was terrifying. It
No
was
way.
a
This is your
terrifying
first game
experience.
that happened
My
and the ref said,
first game.
no
My
way.
first game. So
Wow.
yeah, it was scary. It was scary. But I stayed in it. I grew my game. There's your and every game, you know, it didn't matter what level I got to, how many games I did, how well known I got to be, just because I was the first female official in Manitoba or Saskatchewan to ref university basketball. It didn't matter. It didn't matter how many games I did, or how good I probably got. I was nervous before every game.
Mm,
Before the ball gets tossed, before you're like, what's going to happen? There's just so many unexpected.
yeah.
I guess it's expect the unexpected, and
Mhm.
that's certainly true in every basketball game you officiate.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
It's interesting when you were explaining it your first experience. I had a few flashes in my head of, me going from high school to college and the jump in talent and the game, it's a big jump. It's not a small one. It's quite the large jump.
Big
And
jump.
so
Yeah.
officiating, it must have just been like, okay, this is like you said, there's the coaches, the pressure, like the teams are well prepared and everyone's way bigger, way more athletic. It's like way faster. I can imagine, and then just having that interaction with when you're with someone from your team, and you're like, "This is what this is. Is this what
No, I know. This is supposed to be fun. I know.
They're like, no, 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 this is serious now. This is serious. You wanted this."
Exactly.
Yeah. So then, and I didn't know that. Like, so before we went live, I said, "Hey, okay, we're just cleaning up your bio here." You're the first woman to officiate U Sport in Manitoba and Saskatchewan.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's big. Like
Yeah.
that's a big time thing. And it's interesting now that you tell me, like, you wanted to hold off. You're like, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
curious to think, like, again, no way of knowing this, but like maybe you do it and then you're like, this isn't for me because you weren't ready.
Yeah.
Mentally, emotionally, whatever. Like you weren't ready, and then maybe you just never officiate, and you do the one. You're like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
But
And I've
because you
seen it.
waited,
Yeah. No, I've seen that. Like I've seen that
mm,
from other officials who get in there too soon and they quit. And they
mhm.
don't just quit university, they quit basketball.
Wow.
And we are not in a position, like we are a lean group. We're not in a position to lose these young, keen
Hmm.
officials. You're right. Like there is a very good chance I referee that here, university, and I don't ever referee again.
Hmm.
Because to your point, it's different. The
Hmm.
coaches are more intense, the players are more intense. The coaches are going to hone in on the newbies because that's just
Yes.
what they do. And
Yes.
then they chew you up and spit you out, and you're like, "Ugh, I'm not doing this. This is
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
fun."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I've seen that happen to players on the other end. They like, oh, high
yeah,
school's great, and they got to. They're like, this is not. It's not the same. And I get officials have that same experience, right?
same.
Same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then talk to me a little bit of like you're now doing new sport. What do you
Yeah.
remember, or when was your first national championship? And what do you remember about that?
Um, my first national championship was in 2004 for university. And it was truly a fantastic experience. It was at the University of Saskatchewan.
Mhm.
And again, like some really good friends from there that we're still friends to this day. A great experience. A really probably one of my top, three experiences at nationals
Really?
because it was just such a good group of officials. Everybody was supportive. They were out watching. Everybody deserved to be there. The evaluators, they were known as evaluators then, now referee coaches, they were fantastic and supportive. And it was it was great. It was such a good experience. I think that year, that's the first time I had seen three female officials
No way.
work at that level. So like in the same
On
game,
the same game.
on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same game. It was the championship game was Nadine Crowley, Karen Lasuk, and Donna Townsend.
Wow.
And it was awesome. It was so good to see because I have experienced other national championships where um, I was the only female official.
Mm,
Or I know I went to one that I loved was also a really good experience, but out of the 12 officials there, nine, I think there were 12, nine of them were female, and I was
mm.
the only one on the gold medal game.
Oh,
So
wow.
nine female officials, three male officials, one female, and it was a girls'
Wow.
tournament.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I've also experienced the flip side of it where lots of women and not so many women
Hmm.
on the championship game. And I don't know. I mean, I have to be honest with you. I haven't talked to a lot of like about this to a lot of female players, a lot of female coaches, but I have to believe that they would really like to see women on their game, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
like they would like it. We all, I sometimes female officials have a different perspective on a female basketball game. That women are athletic, girls are athletic, they can block the ball, and it doesn't mean it's a
Mhm.
foul. I'm not saying that happens all the time, but I have
I'm not
seen it happen.
you.
I know
I'm
you're
not
not
gonna
going there.
comment. I'm not gonna
You're
go
not.
there because I've had this conversation. I'm like, why is that happens way too often, and the same thing will happen in the
Yeah.
men's game, and it's not a foul. And again,
Yeah.
that's
And
a
it's
whole thing.
ironic because I've also had that conversation with my partners. So, I do think there are times where we do have a different perspective
Mhm.
on that game
For sure.
because, I've refereed women, girls, men,
Mhm.
boys. And I believe that you need to adjust your game based on what's happening.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I don't decide before I go in that, oh, because this is a female game, they do
Yeah.
this. And I
Yes.
also believe that for me, in my officiating experience, fundamentally, especially at the university level, women have to be better at the fundamentals because they don't
Mhm.
can't play that above the rim game. They can't play that I'm
Yes.
gonna
Yeah.
dunk,
Yeah.
the alley-oop, all of
Mhm.
the really great things that people love to see in basketball. Women can't do that,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
they can be great ball handlers and they can be great passers and they can have crazy basketball IQs and see the floor like nobody else. And, so different perspectives. The games are different,
Yep.
but these women are, just as athletic and can do things just like the guys. We just need to referee the game in front of us. Can't
Yeah.
be, this is
Yeah.
a girls' game. I'm going to referee the game differently. That's just, for me
Yep.
personally, that is
Yep.
not how it works.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great point, and I've seen it. So I right when you said that about the blocking thing, because I don't know if you remember this. I used to a long time ago. I started a company called Stat Trackers. So we used to stat the
Yes,
games.
yes,
I've watched hundreds and hundreds, and not
yes,
as a coach, not as a fan, but as a
right.
stat. So I'm like right there, and I'm like the amount of times that would happen at the high school level, where these are just
Yeah,
blocks, and on the
I
men's
know.
like with the boys' side, they would count them as blocks, and it would just be
Yeah,
fouls on the women's side. And I
I
was
know.
like, what is going on here? And this was a common conversation. I was
Yeah,
wondering why I had this conversation, but like, yeah, I forgot I did stat trackers all those years, and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and it,
yeah,
and it, and so it's to your point is like it's such a valid point. It's just like officiating the game that's in front of you. Right? Not being like, oh, women
absolutely.
women can't do this. You bring in these like preconceived notions of like what the game is supposed to be like, and then you put that on top of like, okay, this is the game, and then when something happens that you think isn't right, you call that. And
Yeah,
that's not how it should be. So I love the way you just referee the game in front of you.
yeah,
Um, and I'm sure that probably applies even just to like if a team starts playing differently or a player starts playing differently or like things start changing. And again, we are creatures of habit, but if you
yeah.
plant that thought in your head, referee the game in front of you, and you go into every game like that, you're gonna be less likely to fall into just like habit-based officiating. All right.
Absolutely. And you
Yeah.
do need to adjust your game based on any changes that the team, and we talk about this as officials, like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, timeout, post game, there's probably going to be some adjustments,
Yeah.
right? Be
Yeah.
ready, don't get caught off guard. So we do pivot and we do talk about it. I think like any vocation, some are better at others
Of
than
course. Of
that
course.
at making adjustments or at refereeing, not having preconceived notions about whatever
Mm-hmm.
team they happen to be officiating or whatever coach they happen to be officiating.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's clean slate every game. Let's see what they bring and
Yeah.
decide once I'm out there,
Yeah.
and hope that my partner or partners and I are on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So you went on to do how many U Sport nationals?
Uh,
Five, I
four,
think. Four.
four.
Okay.
I did four, four.
And then you did a lot of Canada basketball nationals as well. Did you do the Canada basketball national before the U Sport one, or
Uh,
was it after?
yes, before,
Oh,
and
okay.
that's pretty typical of how it
Hmm.
works. Like you
Yeah.
do, I think I started out with three U17 nationals. And then I did a U15 nationals because it was in Winnipeg and they needed a lot of officials.
Hmm.
Ironically, that was one of the ones where I was the only woman on the crew and I got the final, which was awesome. And it was a boys U15, so even
Okay.
better. So that
Nice.
was a good experience for me. I was pretty pleased with myself. And then I did a U19.
Okay.
And then I did after that U Sport. And typically, once you move into U Sport and CCAAs or CCA and U Sport, you don't go back to U17s and U15s because that's
Got it.
really part of developing the officials
Yeah, that's
into the higher
yes.
level, right?
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? Because if you're still doing that, then like, well, the next up and coming official is not going to get that opportunity, right?
And it's discouraging for them if they're
Mhm.
competing against U Sport officials that have been to U Sport nationals.
Yeah.
How are they going to win that fight? They're not going to. And we, this kind of old guard and the senior officials, have a responsibility to develop these
To
younger
develop.
officials,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is officials month because again, this is Earl saying all the same stuff. It's like we got to get out of the way,
Yeah,
at some point.
exactly. Yes,
And then we talked. I mean, I don't know if I mentioned this, but in your intro, but like you've now stepped away from U Sport, right? Like you're
I
not doing
did.
that anymore. You're
Yeah.
stepped away, but you're still
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
high school and a little bit,
I
right?
am.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, high school and senior league. It was a really conscious decision for me. Lots of lots of things kind of going on in my life when I
Mm,
decided to step away from U Sport. I had injured my other knee, like I tore my meniscus.
mm,
I was having trouble running. I mean, I have since had it fixed, but uh, the long and short of it is like women, right? Things like menopause start to hit and things like
mm,
weight gain starts to happen. And then when my knees are so bad. So
mm,
I sort of thought if I'm having trouble keeping up with the play, it's I'm glad I stepped away because I think it's important. Also, back to that point earlier, let's get out of the way and let some young ones start moving into those positions and just help them develop. Since then, I've lost like almost 55 pounds. So that makes a difference on my knees. Now I'm
mm.
like, wow, I could go back and do it. Not going to, because again, what I want to do, I'm the supervisor in the South Central Athletic
Mhm,
Conference for officials, but I'm really working hard to recruit just young officials. I'd love to recruit more female officials.
mhm,
It's always been a struggle. Tired of hearing I don't want to get yelled at as the reason that they don't want to
mm.
officiate, especially because that is the reality. I want to say to coaches and
Yeah.
players and fans, if you would stop, we would have more officials and we wouldn't be an average age of 50
Mm,
because we would have more officials. Um, but I wanted to help develop younger officials. I want to get more officials into the game. I want
mhm.
to get out and work with them. I want to get out and see them. That's really hard to do when you have a full slate of U Sport
It's true.
games.
Yep.
So it was a really conscious decision for me. Um, I'm glad that I did it, and I can still go out and see,
Mm,
a Carrera Lamoureux who
mhm,
is really like growing her game. She's such a good official. She has come so far. I've known her since she was in grade 7 because she played basketball with my daughter. Um, so I'm happy to get out of the way and support a Carrera.
mm.
Go and see a Stacey Hawash work. Like Stacey and I have been friends for a really long time. It's fun just to go with no pressure and just
Yeah,
go and
just
watch and
yeah,
cheer
yeah,
and be excited for them.
yeah.
So, and we've got some like, we've got Patty Rodriguez coming up and we've got Rizzle Muniz and we've
Mhm,
got, I won't even try and say Ellie's last name, but she's a new to Canada official, Iranian, but really, she was an official in Iran and great up and comer. So it's nice to get out of the way and just support them and be there
mhm,
for them.
mhm.
So that was kind of what I was thinking when I
Yeah.
stepped away.
Yeah, and
So
what's so great about that is like again, just says a lot about you, right? Like, look, my knees aren't there. Like, I'm feeling a little, I can't keep up with the game,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you care about mentorship. It was obviously a big part of like staying with officiating, getting into it, staying with it. And now
yeah,
you've come full circle where you are the one mentoring, which is
yeah.
super important, being that like again, obviously you want to recruit officials, period, but to be able to
Yeah,
be a mentor for females. So look, like I was
definitely.
like you just said this. I was the first official in Manitoba. I was to
Yeah.
do your sport. All these things. Like I'm like these are like big things, and it's interesting. You mentioned like yes, the ratio from male officials to female officials obviously still skewed in that regard, but there's still way more. And like I
Yeah,
it's when
way
you
more.
said that like chick ref, like I
Yeah,
remember that. Like I graduated in 2000. Like there was no that wasn't a thing.
yeah,
Like I remember
yeah,
you, but
yeah.
that's just because like I remember you, right? And but
Yeah.
I remember you because you were you're the only one, you know.
Exactly.
And so it is just it's an interesting reflection. But now for you to kind of come full circle, and so you said that's a big part of what you're doing now is in the officiating space. Now you said something that which was really key here, and I want to know what the maybe what the story is behind this. But when did the evaluators start to be called referee coaches? Because I love that. Like just from
Yeah.
a framework of like coaches are there to guide and support and like technically help you, whereas an evaluator is different, right? And
Yeah.
so I guess talk to me a little bit about the difference between a referee coach and what the evaluators did, and then what are some of the things that are going on right now to mentor and recruit more officials?
Yeah. I think that it's been about, I want to say it's about 5 years or so since we went to the referee coach term, 5 or 6 years from the
Mhm.
evaluator term. That was really a CABO slash CBOP initiative. Because to your point, even then, an evaluator did develop and coach and help officials sort of understand how to adjust their game and how to adjust their positioning to be in the right place to make the right decision. Um, so that really was kind of the thought process around it is we were already doing it. Let's
Mhm.
give it a term that really emphasizes what we're doing and what our job is. Um, it in Manitoba is really taking off. We have three national referee coaches in Manitoba, Rick DeGagne,
Okay.
Reed Kenyon,
Yep.
and myself.
Yep.
Um, we are working on a high performance pathway to identify and grow our young up and coming officials.
This is
Um,
Canada-wide or a Manitoba
Well,
initiative?
there is a Canada-wide initiative, but we've
Okay.
really started to emphasize it in Manitoba,
Okay.
just because we want to make sure that we're getting the right officials to those summer national tournaments and then ultimately to CCAA and U Sport. Um, Recognizing that even Canada Basketball, FIBA, their directive is sort of 30 is that sweet spot age. Like you kind of need to be identified
Mhm.
before almost before 25. So we we are really like other provinces trying to focus on our young up and comers. Not that we have forgotten about our kind of bread and butter
Mhm.
senior officials, but we have a responsibility, just like when I started and the Blair Ungers and the Joe Danises were out there supporting me in growing my game. We have a responsibility to help these officials grow their game if they're going to grow and move forward and get to nationals and maybe some of them might have an opportunity to get their FIBA card if we get
Mhm.
in there soon enough and help them develop. So MABO has really put an emphasis on focusing on these young up and coming officials, um, giving them opportunities starting at CCAA, getting them identified for U Sport, even if it's just some exhibition games to start the season. So they get their feet wet because again, in Manitoba, we don't have a lot of opportunities to do 3 person.
Mhm.
And it's really different. I know people just think you're out there as an official, but it is really different than refereeing with two officials.
Mhm.
Um, when you look at FIBA rules, they only have 3 person officiating. We Canada has set up a mechanics manual for 2 person officiating, but there is no 2 person officiating in FIBA anymore.
Ah, Interesting.
So in a perfect world, we'd have enough officials here to do every game with 3 officials.
Got it.
And then our younger officials would be more ready for U
Mm-hmm.
Sport,
Mm-hmm.
CCAA, FIBA, but they're not because they've only done 2-person officiating.
Got it.
So we are working to try and get them opportunities with this group, this high performance pathway group at CCAA, so that this senior group of referee coaches, can go out and watch them and give them feedback and help them adjust their game, and all with the intent of being constructive. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
think this group is really good about um not kind of beating them down where they feel like they don't know what they're doing. I personally have experienced that at nationals, and that is not a good feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but just, you know, giving them that positive encouragement, but giving them some areas of development. I use video. I think most of us use video now
Mm-hmm.
because gone are the days, when I started, of Dave Murphy coming in saying, so, at
Yeah.
6:45 in the first quarter, remember that call or
Yeah.
that no
Yeah.
call? No, I don't. But
Yeah.
now we have video where we can say,
Yeah.
see, you made a no call here. Why'd you make the no call? Oh, I wasn't in the right position. I
Yeah.
was looking at their back. You don't even have to tell them half the time.
They
They're
can see it. Yeah.
recognizing it and making adjustments in their head.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important. Again, like you said earlier, it's important for me personally to give back after the mentors that I had that gave me so much and probably took so much because of what I was doing.
Yeah.
Um, that I want to give back, and I'm happy to give back, and I'm excited about this up and coming group of younger officials.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just to see where their game goes and how I can help them and support that. And that's sort of the evolution for me. I'm glad I'm still on the court because I do think that's an important part of really understanding the game. Can't be removed from the court for a really long time and still have that
Yeah.
foundation of what you
Yeah.
need to be doing. So, once I leave the court, I figure I've probably got maybe 5 good years to do that and support them. And beyond that, I will be too far removed that I just don't have the same grasp of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. For
So
sure.
I want to give back while I can give back and while I'm still involved.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm excited about this group that's coming.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think, yeah, did I speak with Reed? Or I think now all of you have talked a little bit about this official initiative to actually do something, not just let it happen, but hey, we got
Yeah.
to intervene and encourage it and develop
Yeah.
the actual pathways and say, hey, you should go down this path here, not like, hey, I
Yeah.
stumbled I stumbled my
Yeah.
way there and I kind of made it, right? I think so. It's
Yeah.
super exciting because when things are laid out like that, it makes it very clear. And when you have mentors like the ones like yourself and Reed, these are like, in the officiating space, you guys have been through it, and it's really, really cool to see. Like, I love seeing these types of initiatives to help grow the game, because we talked about it earlier. I didn't know this before, and a lot of players may not agree with me, but I think coaches will, is like the officials are part of developing the actual talent on the court. Because if the players are playing a certain way and the officials, like say, weren't up to speed, well, what happens to the players? They can't actually play the way they want to play as well. And these things all have to be happening at the same time, right? The rules,
Yeah.
the officials, the coaches, the players,
Yeah.
everyone has to be working on their game, right? And so I love that. I love that. So we're coming to an end. And I always like to leave with some advice. And this is perfect because of what we just kind of finished talking about, is the mentorship, the recruitment, the pathway. And so I want you to imagine you're now sitting there, and this has probably happened already, but you're sitting there, and let's say Adam has invited you out to let's say that they have that provincial team thing, or they used to do it. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
they still do, right? Meet Team Manitoba, and it's like, hey, we have
Yeah.
Martha Bradbury here, and he wants you to talk to or maybe Fourier Provincial. I think they actually do this, or he used to.
Yeah.
Hey, after you're done playing, you can officiate, right? And so you're now there to kind of talk about coming to officiate. You're not all you're going to go play, and you can also keep playing and officiate. It's great. So you're standing there, and we all understand, like, you could say 100 things, and like they're gonna maybe take one, right? Maybe two,
Yeah.
and the really keen ones will like really get the gist of it. But you want them to understand one, two, or three things, and they walk out of there. And so, what advice? The question is what advice would you give to those young players who might be thinking about getting into officiating? What advice would you give them about progressing through the pathway, starting? Just what would you tell them? What
Yeah.
would you want them to walk out of there with remembering? Like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. I think, I've had this conversation with lots of players. I say to them that, uh, sadly, only like a tiny percentage of them will really go on beyond even high school,
Hmm.
right? To play basketball. And if they love the game the way they seem to love the game, officiating is a great way to stay involved in the game. I mean, to be right front and center, to be involved with the flexibility that you didn't necessarily have as a player, where you had to be at every practice
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's a team sport and you had to be there. You do it on your schedule. You have support when you do it. You'll have mentors when you do it. You won't be out there alone.
Mhm.
It might be scary, but you will have support and frankly, you will love it
Mhm.
because you love the game,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And for a lot of them, I say to them, like, this is a different perspective on the game. So even if you come and you try officiating and you only do it for a year, you have a totally different perspective on a game that you've
Hmm.
played your whole life.
Hmm.
It is simply going to help you grow your basketball IQ.
Yeah, yeah.
Even if you don't continue to do it forever, it's going to grow your game.
Hmm.
So, I ask them to try it. Always up against the battle though of I don't want to get yelled at. And
Yeah.
and I sadly I don't have a comeback for that, except to say that we have brought in a pretty strict discipline policy. We have
Hmm.
a whole bunch of support for it. That MHSAA is supporting it. It's Basketball Manitoba is supporting it. So we recognize that the abuse of officials
Hmm.
is a problem. Um, and we're hoping to help coaches and players and fans see that because of the way some of them are treating officials, these younger people don't want to become officials. And at some
Hmm.
point, this game it won't continue. It's not going
Yeah,
to continue without officials.
yeah.
So I try and tell them, look, you won't be alone. You'll have a senior partner. We
Mhm.
will support you. I promise you that if this is something you think you want to try, just come out and try it.
Yeah,
We'll get you out there. You might love it.
yeah,
It might be,
yeah,
your long lost calling, but
yeah,
you're not going to know unless you try.
yeah, yeah. So it's really about getting them out there. It's,
Yeah,
it's funny when you're saying this, I was like, okay, you get to make money ref in basketball. I don't know who I was
yeah,
talking to, but they actually said that. It's like
yeah,
it's a great opportunity. They get to
yeah,
make money and stay with basketball. How many
yeah,
people get to say they get to make money while they're involved in a basketball game in
yeah.
Manitoba as a high school? Almost nobody,
It's
right?
true.
It's very
It's
true,
true.
right?
And for some younger kids, it that can be a big
It
incentive
can be, yeah,
for
for
sure.
sure, yeah. And then the
Yeah,
other thing that you said, which I thought was really cool, because I was actually thinking about people. I'm like, oh yeah, they're officials, they're officials. They do have like you said, it'll grow your game. As a coach, it'll grow your game, and as a
yeah,
player, it'll grow your game. Because again, I don't want to talk too many people to remember, but someone saying when I officiated, my coaching game changed. Because again, not to say that they were like, you know, rigging the game, but they
yeah,
understood what officials were looking at. And as a result of that, they could advise their players better in a sense to like not do certain things, right? That a
yeah,
player, they don't know, they're just playing, like,
yeah,
oh, do that.
yeah,
Or they could actually help. And like there's like the vantage point of a fan, there's the vantage point, of a parent, a fanatic, the officials, the
yeah,
coaches, the
yeah,
players, a teammate,
yeah.
everyone looks at the game differently. And so if you can get that extra vantage point, it will absolutely change your game. And
It
so, yeah,
100% makes a huge difference
yeah,
because I would love to explain the principle behind every single call I make. The reality is we don't have time to do that in a
no,
game. But you're right. Like it helps the coaches coach that, oh, you can put an armbar on there, but once he has the ball, you have to take that armbar off.
Correct.
Or
Yeah.
when you set your screens, your elbows are too wide. And
Mhm.
if they hit you in the elbow, it's going to be a foul. They can make those adjustments, but it's hard for them to really understand that until they understand the fundamentals of officiating,
Yep.
and the fundamentals of the rule, because I don't know how many coaches are in the rule book the way that we're in the rule book or in the case book,
Yeah.
right? And so we do know that we should know the rules better than anybody,
Mhm.
right? And so if a coach gets out and referees even a few games and gets into the rule book, what a difference it's going to make for the
Yep.
players,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
No, 100%.
For that player that fouls out every game and
Yep.
seems to have no idea what they're doing. What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
have time to explain it. I would love to. You just don't have time to explain it I would say it depends on the game,
Of course.
right?
Of
Like I
course.
just did a JV game where I had to tell the kids what lines we were using for the restricted area and where to
Yeah.
stand, what hashes,
Yeah.
it was that basic, and when they could go in on the free throws. So yes, sometimes we need to be teachers too,
Mhm.
but there's, we can't do it on every call.
Yeah.
That's the reality. So
Yeah. No,
I encourage everyone to get out and ref a bit.
Yeah. No,
See what
100%.
happens.
100%. Why not? Right. Like, well, I appreciate you taking the time. It was lovely to hear your story because, again, I don't think I said at the start of this, but I say at the start of so many podcasts. Obviously, I know you as much as like, oh, there's Martha. She's doing the senior men's game. She's doing my game, and like I just know you. Oh, there. She is. She's doing the U Sport game. But I don't know where you come from. Didn't know that you were the first woman to. I don't know any of this stuff, and so whenever I get these opportunities, it's really special just to like hear the story, hear your journey with basketball, and then also the thing that I love so much about you, Martha, is there's definitely a level of I don't want to say you're not cocky, like you're very like, look, like the story you said, I'm not ready, like that kind of stuff. It says a lot, and I know the up and coming officials that you're going to be mentoring have a special mentor, and the same wonderful things you've said about some of your mentors, people are probably saying about you, and are grateful to have you on the space. And obviously Manitoba's happy that you came here, happy that that you're a transport. You had probably the nicest thing to say about the city that anyone I've had on the podcast so far. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Darcy, and I really appreciate you having me on. This has been really good and kind of enlightening, so it's been great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share this series, and reach out to us with your comments on the show. Thanks again for joining us.